Hi, my name is Tom, and today I want to talk to you about my new camera. It's not really a new camera, it's the Panasonic Lumix S5, the Mark I. Not the Mark II, even though that one came out just recently. I chose this one for a few different reasons I'm going to get into in this video. So let's first, as always, check out some footage, and then I'm going to tell you about my thoughts, what I like, what I don't like, and a few things more. Enjoy!
We must pay homage to him.
First off, you might be asking yourself, why did I get this camera instead of the new model, the Panasonic Lumix S5 II, which everybody is talking about right now? The first obvious reason is it's way cheaper. This camera you can get now for under €1,000, which is just insane. I bought this camera used like half a year ago for under 1,000, which was a very good price. Still is a good price, but now you can get a new one for under 1,000, which is just insane when you think about just a few years ago what's possible these days. And yeah, that's obviously the first reason why I got this camera. And the second one is the image quality is not that much worse. In fact, in some ways, I think this camera has a superior image quality than the new model. I don't know if you heard about all these controversies regarding the new sensor of this camera, which it doesn't have a new sensor, people say, but it's definitely behaving differently in low light with more noise, more sharpness, and yeah, having all that autofocus face detection on there really seems to have had an impact on the overall image quality. According to a lot of reviewers I trust personally. I personally have never tested the new camera, but from what I've heard, the new model has some slight issues, especially in other profiles that aren't vlog. And yeah, this is all something to consider when you pay like more than double the price for a camera that's arguably in some ways worse image quality wise. So that's also a reason why I didn't really go for the new model. It's obviously a very subtle issue, like the rolling shutter difference, the more sharpness, all that stuff you can mitigate. All that stuff is not really something that any client or anyone really would notice if you put it side by side. So this is not really the main reason, but yeah, this is also something to consider. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Of course, there are other features the new camera offers, like ProRes recording internally, open gate recording, and great autofocus obviously, but these were all things that I really don't need. I mean, autofocus is really nice to have, and I'm gonna go more into the issues with this camera and regarding the autofocus later in this video, but all the other stuff like raw recording, internal ProRes, and yeah, open gate, all that stuff is really cool, but it was really not that worth it to me to pay that much more for these features that I basically would never use anyway, probably. And still, this older model, this camera that's almost over 3 years old at this point, or 3 years on the market, offers still a lot of great stuff that I probably also don't ever need. So it just didn't make sense for me. So let's talk about my setup real quick. As you can see, I'm keeping it fairly simple. There's a cage on there with a handle. They're both from Nietzsche or Nietzsche or however you want to pronounce it. I have no idea. I didn't really buy it because it's the greatest one to get. I just got it because it was cheap, it was on sale, and it honestly works really, really well. I don't use a monitor, an external one, as you can see. I just have the normal monitor out, and for other stuff I just use the EVF, which works great. On the top panel itself I have a power bank, which really is mind-blowing for me how well this setup works. With this setup I can run this camera all day and I don't ever have to change the battery. I mean, there's always an internal battery in there and I don't always use it with this power bank, so that's why it's on the handle. I can just remove the handle if I want to, and then I have a great clean setup with just a cage. If I put the handle on, I can just connect this short USB-C cable to the camera and I can pretty much just be without any worries because my camera will be powered. I have a power bank from von Mehlen. That's a German company. I don't know if you can get this power bank in particular. You don't really need to. Just make sure you get something that's at least 10,000 milliamps and supports the power delivery 20 watts. I think like power delivery, quick charge. I don't really know what the specs are, so I just really like this one because it really integrates well with the all metal, black or aluminum or whatever it's made of. Definitely some metal type. And it just looks great in combination with everything, with this black color and the dots which show me how much battery is left, and it just looks cool. That's why I got it. It's probably not like the best all-rounder, but for me it works really well. So I'll just link it all in the description and you can check it out for yourself. So let's talk about my lens real quick. It's the Panasonic 24-105 zoom lens, and I don't think this lens needs a separate review from me because it's already well known as a great all-rounder, and it's honestly right now the only lens I'll really need for this camera. It just has a great zoom range. You can go wide, you can go really close, you can go even closer when you put the camera into Super 35 mode, and yeah, it basically is very versatile. It works very well for my setup. If you watch my channel, then you know that I used to shoot on a Sony RX10 Mark II, and that was a great camera. It still is a great camera, but it obviously had some limitations. The biggest one being its really tiny sensor, and yeah, one of the problems of a tiny sensor is getting shallow depth of field is not really easy, and with that camera I pretty much always shot it f2.8, zoomed all the way in, and not always, of course, because in some situations you don't want shallow depth of field. But yeah, to get some creamy cinematic headshots of people, then yeah, you want that. And yeah, when I first got this lens on my S5, I thought, well, f4, that doesn't seem really good. But f4 on a full frame camera is something completely different than f4 on my old camera. And someone here can probably do the math. I'm not going to do it right now. But f4 is more than I need in terms of creaminess in the background on this camera, so that's not a problem either. Of course, like f2.8, f1.4 or something like that would still be great to have. I'm not going to get it on this lens, but for me it would be more like getting more light onto the sensor would be great. But in terms of like shallow depth of field, in terms of creaminess in the background, bokeh, I have no issues with this setup. So it's definitely not the cheapest option out there. This lens is currently more expensive than the camera itself, but yeah, I'm happy I got it. It just communicates really well with the camera. Obviously it's a Lumix product on a Lumix camera, and yeah, the stabilization in combination with the stabilization on the lens just works really well. You can really almost get tripod shots with your hands, and yeah, all these micro jitters and all that stuff you usually get doesn't really happen with this setup because it's already quite heavy, the lens is quite heavy, and the stabilization features work fantastically. So yeah, I'm happy I got it, and it's currently the only lens I'll need. Now let's talk about the image, and yeah, you be the judge. I think it looks great. Pretty much every camera these days looks great, and this one is no exception in my opinion. Coming from an 8-bit camera to this 10-bit, there's so much more room for correcting exposure, correcting mistakes basically, and yeah, I think it's great. and yeah, it's just fun to play with, and it's not hard to get a great looking, pleasing image. In terms of low light, this camera is also a completely different beast compared to my old camera. Don't expect an FX3 level low light capability, but it's still very, very capable. ISOs 10,000, even 12,800 can still look quite good if you know what you're doing. You should always, and I repeat that in pretty much every video, have control over your lights, but we all know it, sometimes we don't. Just know that this camera can still have your back, can still be very versatile, even in low light situations. I recently shot a few concerts, and yeah, you know how tricky lighting situations can get in these scenarios, and yeah, this camera pulled through and gave me a decent image. And yeah, there can be a lot of noise, like don't expect a clean image always, because if you're just winging it, sometimes it's not going to look as great. But yeah, in terms of image quality in low light, this is still a fantastic camera that offers a lot of capabilities. And yeah, keep in mind, use it effectively. You have to know what you're doing, but if these things are in order, then you can shoot great images in low light. So let's get into some of the negatives. And you know it was coming, the autofocus. And while I already said autofocus isn't like a huge priority for me, it would definitely be nice to have a better working autofocus than on this camera, because it's actually terrible at some situations, and it's not always terrible, which is the frustrating part about this camera. Sometimes it works really well, it locks on, it keeps being locked on, and the screen always shows you that it knows where it has to focus on, but sometimes it just doesn't do it, and there's no explanation to why it doesn't do it, because sometimes it's the easiest situations where you think, yeah, this should be able to handle it, but it just doesn't. And sometimes you think, yeah, this could be tricky, and the camera just locks on perfectly. There's not really a way you can like be sure that it works, because this camera is just too unpredictable in that regard, and you just have to live with it. Of course, that is all fixed now with the new cameras, so it doesn't really make sense to complain about it now, but yeah, it's still mind-blowing how bad it can be sometimes. So my method is to just use manual focus, and when I want to lock on something, I just press the autofocus on button that you can always use on this camera, even when you're in manual focus, and then it locks on fairly quickly most of the time. Again, not always. And with the peaking functions, which always work very well, you can just set the focus that way and set it and forget it basically. So that solved the issue pretty much for me. But again, autofocus would be nice to have, especially when you use a gimbal or something where you move a lot and you can't really operate the lens at parts when you have a gimbal or something like that. So for these specific situations, you need a newer camera. Another thing I want to criticize a bit is the menu. Of course, it's better than my old Sony. I think we all heard from the old Sony cameras back then, they all had terrible menus that are really confusing. But this camera is definitely better, but not that much better that I would say if this is a great menu. I just want to say that I'm pretty much used to it now, and it definitely worked way faster for me than with my old Sony. But still, there's still some stuff where I think, like, why not just make it like Blackmagic or something? Just simplify it. I know this camera offers a lot of photo features, a lot of other stuff that you don't really need as a videographer or filmmaker. But yeah, just get rid of all these menus, get rid of all that stuff, make it easier to handle. And also, I'm just experiencing this now. I'm using the camera right now remotely with my smartphone, and yeah, even that setup was such a hassle. And yeah, I don't know if there's other companies out there that do it better, but yeah, I just want to say that it all works, you can all get it done, but expect a few frustrations on the way. But then once you go through that, it's fine. Another thing that isn't really a criticism, but something that's obvious, but maybe not to everyone, is that this is a 10-bit camera, which shoots MOV files, which means this will take a bit more processing power. So if you have an older machine, I used to have a MacBook Pro 2015, and yeah, this thing still works and you can get it done, But if you want to edit anything without proxies, there's just no chance. It will stutter immediately and you will have a lot of frustrations. So keep those things in mind. I now own a Mac Mini with an M2 Pro chip, and with that it's no problem at all. Pretty much anything I try, it works perfectly, and I'm really happy with that machine, by the way. And yeah, my MacBook Pro, I still use it, but not for editing anymore. But in the first few months I got this camera, I still did, and for that I just had to use proxies, and then it works fine as well. Still, it sounded like a jet engine, and it probably would have exploded at some point. So I'm happy that I upgraded. So keep those things in mind when you get a new camera, a camera that has more capabilities, offers more bit depth and more data. It can be very taxing on your hardware that you edit with. So keep that in mind and make sure the setup you have will work. So now, what are my final thoughts on this camera? Do I regret buying it? No, obviously not. And if you look at the price, just look at the FX3, look at the A7S from Sony and compare it to this camera, and there's really a lot of stuff where this camera can hold its own and is maybe even superior in some ways when you look at the image quality and stuff like that. Some people like Sony more maybe, but a lot of people prefer Panasonic. And yeah, is it as good in low light? No, absolutely not. Is it capable in low light? Yes, it is. Is the autofocus on the OG S5 good? No, absolutely not. It's probably one of the worst autofocus systems I've used on a camera, and it's even worse than my old Sony, which also didn't offer face detection, but it worked. So yeah, for autofocus, if that's really important to you, this also isn't the camera for you. But other than that, if you look at the price, for under €1,000, there's so much stuff you can do, and there's even an anamorphic mode and all that stuff, which I personally haven't even explored. And yeah, for a camera that's now 3 years old, for this price, it's still great, and it will be great in the future. So if you're thinking about buying it, go for it. Other than that, I just mentioned everything that you need to know. And that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. This was probably a little longer, but yeah, my videos are getting longer and longer, I feel like. So if you enjoyed it this far, if you watched to this point, then please leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't. And yeah, I really enjoy making these videos, and there will be a new video coming soon if I feel like it. But yeah, I'm a bit inconsistent right now, but I'll try to do my best. If this video gets a lot of views, a lot of interaction, then the next video will come a bit sooner maybe. But yeah, I cannot control that. I don't get the YouTube algorithm these days. But yeah, anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.